Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddham Dhamman Sangham Namasami. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Greetings, lovely people. How are we today? Welcome to another week. Hopefully you guys on Christmas holidays now and enjoying yourselves, and you get a well-deserved Christmas break. It's very good. So, welcome to my channel, Mindful Samadhi. And this week I have decided to continue on from the previous 2 or 3 weeks videos where I've been going through different formulas, so to speak, that the Buddha comes up with to aid and assist us in our meditation practice. Okay, so those include the 4 foundations of mindfulness, 7 factors of awakening, the 6 sense doors, the 4 factors of power. There's so many different things that we can cover: the 4 noble truths, the 8-fold path, the 5 spiritual faculties, and there's actually so many more that I haven't actually gotten to, but some of these I have actually done a video on. And so today and this week what I want to do is cover a couple more. Today I want to cover the 5 hindrances, which is a super important thing in our practice. Okay, so basically in Buddhism, and particularly in the Theravada tradition, as described in the Pali Canon, the 5 hindrances, or in Pali we refer to this as pañca nīvaraṇā. Okay, pañca nīvaraṇā. Now, what they are is basically mental factors, and they obstruct or prevent progress in our meditation. Also our concentration, and also the development of insight or vipassana. Okay, so what they do is they cover and they cast like a shadow on the mind, so to speak, and that prevents clarity, mindfulness, and even deeper states like jhanic and absorption states as well. So these hindrances can also arise in our daily lives as well, and they can essentially, what they do is they weaken wisdom and they lead to unskillful and also unwholesome actions. So the Buddha frequently actually taught about these 5 hindrances in the Satipatthana Sutta and also the Nivarana Sutta, and he emphasized recognition, understanding, and the importance of overcoming them as a key to the path. So without further ado, here are the 5 hindrances. Okay, so I've given explanations. What I've done is I've given explanations and common analogies, which are essentially referenced in various scriptures that I found. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use water as the examples. So bear with me, okay? Some of these I've actually taken from suttas and discourses I've read and I've watched on YouTube. But I find this water, using the water analogies, I find is the best way to kind of explain these hindrances and extrapolate them in a form of, like an image that we can look and go, oh, okay, that makes sense, Anyway, let me try and explain it, okay? So number 1, we have sensual desire. So we call this karma chanda, okay? Karma chanda. And that's what the Pali word is for sensual desire, is karma chanda, okay? And this is craving for pleasurable things and different sensory experiences. So for example, sights, sounds, smells, tastes, touches, thoughts, and obviously the more obvious one, sensual desire for a man or a female, a male or a woman. These kind of cravings all come under this category of sensual desire, okay? Also, the way we think about these things as well. So this refers to essentially the taste, touch, smell and things, they refers to the 6 sense doors, which are what gives the attention and the awakening of these desires that we have. I will post a video soon on the 6 sense doors. Probably in my next video, I think I'll do that. But in essence, what happens is it pulls the mind towards gratification, and it basically scatters our attention. So the analogy I could use here, so imagine like a bowl of water. You know, when I was younger anyway, we had the tie-dyed stuff, and you used to be able to tie-dye your clothes in all these really like beautiful colors and things. So imagine that tie-dye liquid and you put it, in a bowl of water. So at first glance, it looks bright and wonderful. The colors look beautiful. It appears very nice at first sight. But what actually happens is the mind becomes basically tinted, and it's unable to reflect clearly. So that's a good analogy on understanding, practical application of what sensual desire kind of is. It's looking on the surface of the water, it looks all beautiful and colorful because we put all these nice tie-dyes on there. It looks very attractive, and at first glance it's like, whoa, that looks amazing. But we can't actually reflect our mind state very clearly when we're looking at it because we're too infatuated with the beauty of it, so that's how that kind of works. Second, we have ill will or aversion. Now we call this Vyapada, okay, and that's in Pali. So there are emotions like anger, hatred, resentment, or even spitefulness towards others. Even oneself, or even just general everyday situations, okay? So what this does is it agitates the mind and it blocks things like loving kindness, like metta, okay? So the analogy here, the water analogy here I have, is imagine having like a pot of boiling water, right? So that pot of boiling water is heated on a fire and it's just rapidly bubbling, evaporating, and it's all turbulent. So when you look into it, what it does, it ends up creating a distortion on top of the water when you look at that, because it's bubbling so rapidly and you can't actually see at the bottom. So what's happening is the water, it's eliminating any chance of reflection, because we can't see, because there's so much commotion going on the surface of the water because of the rapid bubbling and so much heat. So we can't actually look at the reflection of that either, okay? So it's another weird water analogy, but that's how I kind of look at that one. The next one is the third one, being sloth and torpor. Now we call this tinna midda, okay? So this could be perhaps the feeling of being either lethargic or having drowsiness, which may occur with us while we're doing our practice, or even like mental dullness or lack of energy or motivation. Okay, so what this does, in turn, it makes the mind heavy and unresponsive. So an analogy here, imagine like the ocean shore, right? The front of the ocean shore where the water's covered. Say if you're looking over a cliff at the ocean, and the corner of the cliff here, you've got like the rocks, which are mounted up on the side, and the ocean's, going over the rocks. And then imagine they're all covered with algae and weeds around that area, and it's all stagnant and overgrown. And what that's doing, essentially, it's blocking the light and the clarity. Okay, so that's like our minds. So that's how we look at that one. The fourth one is restlessness or worry. And we also could refer to this as being remorseful. Okay, we call this uddacha kukkucha. Okay, so this is when the mind is agitated with the inability to slow or settle down. Okay, so this is often accompanied by feelings of anxiety or regret, and the consistent arising of the commonly referred to monkey mind. Okay, so the constant chatter in our minds. That's another one. So the analogy for that would probably be, I'm not sure if any of you guys have gone sailing or anything, but if you can imagine just even visually, just looking at the top of the surface of, say, a lake or a river, and it's very windy, so it's been ruffled and affected by the strong winds, and this is causing the surface to become unsettled, and you get the white caps and the choppy waves. Okay, so that's also another analogy for our mind. It's all unsettled, and we can't see clearly. So this is leading us to see no stable reflection in our mind whatsoever. Okay, so lucky last is doubt and uncertainty. So we call this vicikiccha, okay? And this is what I refer to as skeptical doubt about either the teachings, it could be the teacher, it could be the path, or it could even be one's own ability in practicing the path, so to speak. So the analogy here is, imagine muddy water in a dark place. It's all dirty and unclear, and it's impossible to see through. That again is like our minds when we have skeptical doubt. So some of these analogies I've detailed, but majority of these analogies, like about the water, I've actually found these from discourses like the Samanyapala Sutta. Okay, so these actually illustrate how our hindered minds cannot see reality clearly. So the Buddha's sort of laid out analogies for us. So majority of those water analogies are actually coming from discourses I've read, like the Samanyapala Sutta. But yeah, so the Buddha's sort of given us analogies about water that we can use to understand about, if we don't have a clear, calm mind, it's very difficult, and you won't be able to see any reflection whatsoever. So, so that's the water analogies and things like that. So, if we don't have a clear mind, it's, the reflection, it's not going to happen, okay? So we need to investigate with a calm and equanimous mindset. That's very important. Overcoming these various hindrances involves us to have a strong level of mindfulness, and so then we can recognize them when they arise and come to the surface, okay? So what we need to do firstly is we need to investigate and then apply antidotes or remedies to these situations, these 5 hindrances. So how do we do this? So for example, we can use things like contemplation of impermanence for desire. We can use metta, like loving kindness, for things like ill will, and a build-up of energy for things like sloth and torpor, and things like that. So temporarily suppressing them, it allows for access to jhanas, the absorption states, okay? Whilst fully eradicating them occurs through insight, so vipassana, and essentially the stages of awakening as well. So they're contrasted with the 7 factors of enlightenment, bojjhanga or bojjhangas, which are essentially, what they do is they nourish us with a clear mindset, okay? So that's super important. Now, these universal mental states actually affect everyone, okay? So working with them skillfully eventually transforms our obstacles with opportunities for growth, okay? So here are the hindrances I've laid out basically with antidotes. So I've come up with some antidotes for you guys. They're quite common antidotes as well. So we can sort of eliminate these hindrances if they do come to the surface, all right? So basically sensual desire, so craving for pleasures, the antidote for that would be contemplation of the body's unattractiveness. We call this asubha, and that's essentially, we can utilize a few different things. We could utilize the 32 parts of the body. We could do cemetery contemplations or meditations on, cemetery, or back then they called them charnel grounds. That's, a bit more of a intermediate advanced technique, but I'd say contemplation of the 32 parts of the body. You can choose a part and then just have a deep contemplation meditation session on that. So for example, the hair of the head, the hair of the skin, the hair of the armpits and the nose, and the realization that this hair grows out of all different parts of our body, that's essentially a contemplation on one of the 32 parts of the body. So we could also do that. And the other one is guarding the sense doors. So our 6 sense doors, we need to guard those and have restraint and discipline. All right. So the other one is reflecting on the insights. So you can reflect on things like impermanence, you know, or even drawbacks of sensuality, you know, so anicca. And the other one in certain cases might help is having moderation in our daily eating as well. We might have eaten something heavy, and this can also lead to sloth and torpor, you know, or something rich in our food, or maybe our diet's not correct, or we're overeating, or, you know, some of these things can also bring rise to these issues as well. So the other one is ill will and aversion. So that's anger, hatred, or having resentment towards something or even someone. So antidotes here could include the cultivation of loving kindness, so metta bhavana, or metta meditation, we call in English, okay? It could be having compassion, so karuna, and having forgiveness in the heart, okay? That's also very important. You know, the reflection on karma on our actions as well. So understanding that actions will eventually return to the doer, okay? That's the cause and effect thing. So karma is also very important. The next is sloth and torpor, so tinna midda. So that's being lethargic and having drowsiness and dullness. The antidotes for that would be, you know, arousing virya, so energy. You know, so in doing that, we can do things like we can alternate our posture, we can mindfully slowly adjust our position in our sitting meditation, or what I usually suggest to my students is stand up and do some walking meditation. If you are doing the sitting meditation, you can also maybe perhaps open your eyes, because when you generally close your eyes, the body's automated responses usually start to feel drowsiness and tiredness, because usually when we have our eyes closed for a prolonged period of time, usually means that we're about to go to sleep, doesn't it? So opening your eyes can also help. And, you know, you can even do different things like, you know, look at some bright light. If there's some bright light around, you can maybe just stare into that briefly. Obviously don't go blind by staring into the sun for too long or anything silly. But looking at a bright light temporarily can also wake you up as well, and alleviate that restlessness, and that, you know, it sort of helps, and it does arouse some energy in us if we're feeling tired as well. So another thing is, if you're doing sitting meditation, or perhaps if you're sitting on a chair doing meditation, you could like rub your limbs or something, and that can also sort of wake you up. You know, it's important to investigate the potential causes. So like I said before, you know, sometimes eating heavy and rich foods can also be a catalyst for these things as well. So, you know, another thing we could do is we could perhaps watch or read some Dharma. So we could, you know, put some YouTube on and watch a discourse or a Dharma discussion, or we could flick through a few pages and, you know, read some Dharma, and that could also give us some motivation and bring some energy back, and even perhaps discipline as well. And alternatively, if you're sort of lacking this energy and focus, you can also do things like go and talk to your teacher, you know, and perhaps even get some advice or, you know, inspiration from them as well. So it's always good to talk to a noble person, another Buddhist, you know, member from either the Sangha or a monk, or even if you have a teacher yourself, that's also very helpful as well. Okay, so the next one, I would say, what is it? We're up to restfulness and worry. So remorse, so we call this uddhacca kukkucca, okay? So agitation, anxiety, regret, things like that. So the antidote for things like that would be, you know, calming the mind through things like sati, like mindfulness. And we can do that by, you know, mindfulness of breath, so anapanasati, and we can reflect on peaceful, perhaps a peaceful moment that you can remember, or a time you might have had. You could be honest about, you could even be honest and express like a negative situation you might have been holding on to from the past. That can also help. So letting go of any past or future concerns, that's also a good thing. Skeptical doubt or uncertainty is the next one. So vichikiccha, okay, so what this is, it's basically like having skeptical doubt is like indecision about the path, the teacher, or even the teachings, okay? So the antidotes to this is study and reflection on the Dharma. So talking with noble friends, we call this kalyana mitta, or even your teacher, is very important, okay? So if you're ever having skeptical doubt or things like this, it's really important that you speak to your teacher if you have one, and they can go through this with you. It's very common in our practice to have skeptical doubt at some stage in our practice. So talking to a noble friend or someone with some, prior meditation experience, if you don't have a teacher, is also advisable. Even a member of the Sangha, like another monk or someone, or more importantly, probably if you have a teacher, then just talk to your teacher, because they will probably know you at a good enough standard where they can guide you through this skeptical doubt stage, okay? And then bring you back this virya, this energy that you need, so you can continue on your practice, okay? The other thing is clarifying the Four Noble Truths or the Eightfold Path. So delving into things like dependent origination. We haven't covered that yet on my YouTube channel. I will do that. That's going to be a very, very long topic, dependent origination, called paticca samuppada. Very, very important in Buddhism, and also life in general, really. You can look into that. That's another option. I will do a video on that later. That'd probably be sometime mid next year, though, I think, because we still have quite a few other things to cover. Anyway, building faith through seeing results in the practice, all whilst not attaching or clinging to any experience had. So it's good to, get faith back and alleviate and overcome skeptical doubt by looking and seeing the results that you've, gained in your practice. But when you do that, you've got to make sure that you don't attach and cling to these experiences. So if you have things like piti and rapture and sukha, or you have some absorption moments with into jhanas, some jhanic stages or something, make sure you have this equanimous mindset and you don't attach and cling to these things, because this will hinder your practice. And more times than not, it will put you back in your practice a little bit, because when something positive or something happens and we cling to that and go, I want this again, generally it won't arise, because we're wanting and we're attaching and clinging. So be very careful when we do things like this. So don't, any experience, negative or positive for that matter, don't cling to it. This is arising and passing nature. Understand anicca, impermanence, everything is temporary. What goes up must go down, and understand all these universal laws, and also the Buddha's laws, or not laws, but the things that the Buddha's put into place for us to understand this, reality of nature, so to speak. And then we don't cling and attach to things. And then our practice progresses, okay, further and further, and doesn't go the opposite direction. Okay, so knowing that attachment and clinging to things like jhanas and other profound states might impact our practice in a negative way. So just be careful of that, okay? Universal supports for all hindrances include noble friendship, like having suitable conversations, having dharma discussions and things like that, as well as strong mindfulness, so satipatthana, okay? It's very important. Having mindfulness, I cannot emphasize the importance of sati, it's very important in our practice. The 4 foundations of mindfulness, I did a video on that, and I will cover, I might do a a discourse or a Dharma discussion on the Mahasatipatthana Sutta myself, and the Anapanasati Sutta next year, and we can delve into that at a deeper level as well and get some understanding. But essentially, mindfulness is very important in one's practice in meditation. Okay, so having this sati sampajanya as well, which is mindfulness with clear comprehension, so we can do this in our everyday tasks, whatever we're doing, if we're working or driving a vehicle or whatever it may be. Having this mindfulness with clear comprehension and being in the present moment as much as possible is a very powerful and strong thing, and it means your practice is definitely developing in a good way. Okay, so yeah, basically working patiently with these antidotes that we've talked about will essentially transform the hindrances into opportunities, okay, for deeper clarity and, you know, liberation in itself. So that's basically it. That's the 5 hindrances. Yeah, they're very, very, very powerful things, and unfortunately at some stage in your practice you will come across these 5 hindrances. More than likely all of them. Now, it's understanding how to navigate through them with an equanimous mindset, not being thrown around too much, so to speak, and just understanding them. So now I've given you some analogies of, some water analogies of how the mind gets rattled and loses clarity, through giving you some different examples, you know, with rough seas and lakes and rivers and, you know, dark muddy waters and, you know, algae and all these different things. They're all just examples to explain to us how the mind can get clouded. So I'm just giving or emphasizing different ways so we can really get an understanding that it's important to have a clear mindset, okay? And then giving you some antidotes or remedies on how we can fix these problems as well. So when they come up to the surface next time, you can have a look at this video, and now you know some ways that we can navigate our way out of these hindrances, okay? Because they will happen in our practice from time to time, and there's nothing wrong with that. It means your practice is actually developing, and eventually we will eradicate these defilements, okay? But hindrances, they will come to the surface, and there's, you know, kilesas and all sorts of different things. But hopefully this brief discussion today on the 5 hindrances you guys get an understanding about. And yeah, until maybe the next couple of days I'm going to do one, probably on the 6 sense bases, okay? So we'll cover you know, the 6 sense bases in regards to the eye, the ear, the nose, the tongue, you know, and these kind of things, the mind, and I'll cover the proximate causes. So what I mean by that is what the uses are, the actions of these things, which are obvious to most people, if not all people, but we're going to do it in a meditative understanding. So, you know, for example, you know, we can talk about, say, the tongue, for example. Proximate causes, obviously, for tasting, isn't it? And for, you know, aiding in chewing and digesting. But the tongue is also utilized as, it can potentially be used as a weapon, a verbalized weapon, in the sense where we could say some very unwholesome, hurtful things to other people. And that can mentally really cause a lot of traumatic experiences in other people's minds. And this is a form of unwholesome or akusala karma that we don't want to create for ourselves. So going through the 5 senses is also very important. Six sense bases. So we will go through that. I'll probably cover that this week. And perhaps maybe even the 5 spiritual faculties. So I might cover that one as well. So that one is basically like faith, energy, saddha, virya, sati, mindfulness, concentration and wisdom. So we'll cover those ones as well. Maybe this week or after Christmas I'll do that one. But anyway, thank you all for listening to the 5 hindrances today. And yeah, enjoy your Christmas if I don't see you beforehand. And many blessings and all the best. Te Reo on Sunday.